press conference at the US State Department was due to begin at 8:30 p.m. Our time now, obviously. It's been postponed. Let's go to Washington, D.C., where our correspondent Simon Marks is standing by. Simon, what are we expecting from this conference? Do you think that the issue of Donald Trump's comments about South Africa will come up?
Without question, Jane. I mean, this is the daily State Department press briefing. It's going to be hosted by Heather Nauert, the State Department spokeswoman, who, interestingly, is a former Fox News correspondent. Interesting, given that it was that broadcast on Fox News on the Tucker Carlson program last night that kicked all of this off, with President Trump watching it and then tweeting about it. There's no question that the correspondents gathered at the State Department will be questioning Heather Nauert about this. Indeed, there have been several attempts throughout the day by all of us to try and get some kind of response from the State Department to what Donald Trump said on Twitter, essentially directing his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, as the president put it, to closely study the situation regarding land in South Africa. We don't know what that means. Is that some kind of marching order to Mike Pompeo? Does it make any difference to the way in which the State Department is approaching South Africa or not? So there's no doubt that it will come up. There are other issues that are going to come up in that briefing as well. The Trump administration appointed a new envoy to North Korea today, so I expect there will be some questions about that, plus the other big international developments that have taken place since the last briefing at the State Department 24 hours ago. But I think there's no question that the events of the last few hours here, since that tweet was published by President Trump late at night from the family quarters at the White House, have put the land issue on the map here in Washington. And just within the last few minutes, we've had some reaction to all of this from a man who was once considered as a possible Secretary of State in the Trump administration, Senator Bob Corker. He has since blotted his copybook with Donald Trump. He's told reporters on Capitol Hill that the president's Trump appears to me to be a base stimulator. He says there are portions of those who support the president that are, I'm sure, that generates excitement. I mean, it's, you know what I'm saying. And what, of course, he's saying is that President Trump has seized on this issue in order to try and divert attention away from some of the legal issues that he's facing here, becoming ever more grave, but also in an attempt to try and stimulate his political base out there. 38% of American voters still standing with him. The Anti-Defamation League up in New York issued a statement a little bit earlier today saying that President Trump's tweet, in which he referenced what he claimed is the large-scale killing of white South African farmers, in the words of the Anti-Defamation League, is extremely disturbing and echoes a long-standing and false white supremacist claim. That's the view of the Anti-Defamation League up in New York. What does the State Department make of all this? What are they going to do? Hopefully we'll find out in about 17 or 18 minutes' time.
And obviously Donald Trump knows what he's talking about with his long experience with Africa, how he's named countries, and the fact that there's not even an ambassador here.
Yes, I had actually forgotten about the president's reference to Nambia at one point early on in his presidency. It was noted by one Washington correspondent who keeps a very close eye on Donald Trump's Twitter account that this is the first time the president has used the word Africa in a tweet since he became president. And everybody watching knows just how ubiquitous Donald Trump is on Twitter. So that gives you some sense of where Africa and South Africa sits in the list of priorities for President Trump's White House. But the fact that he responded to that Fox News report is, I think, a very clear indication that this was a successful attempt by the Cato Institute, a libertarian-leaning think tank here in Washington, D.C., fueled by members of AfriForum, leaders of AfriForum, who visited Washington, D.C. a few months ago, held meetings at the Cato Institute, happened to run into the National Security Advisor, Ambassador John Bolton, in a green room at, where else, Fox News, met with Senator Ted Cruz, another leading voice on the right, a man that many people here think, may have another presidential run in him at some point. I mean, this has been a coordinated attempt by some to try and get this issue in front of Donald Trump, and they picked the right vehicle to do it. The Tucker Carlson program on prime time, on the Fox News channel, the channel the president watches when the day is over and he heads up to the White House family quarters and he sits down and turns the TV on before he heads to bed. They knew what they were doing, and they got the response that they were trying to seek.
And that's how he formulates his foreign policy, isn't it? And you raised it a little bit earlier on. No idea what his tweet actually means, if he's going to, I don't know, conduct some sort of invasion into South Africa because of these mass killings, or if he thinks it's a good idea to be used in the United States. Also, what you touched on is how he often uses this kind of, what seems like a crazy remark, to divert attention away from the real troubles at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was certainly part of this as far as the president's strategy was concerned. Just within the last few hours, there have been a whole slew of fresh developments that deepen the legal jeopardy that the president finds himself facing. But he has used Twitter before to kind of issue directives to members of his cabinet. He famously took to Twitter and, out of the blue, much as this tweet appeared last night, announced that he was banning transgender personnel from serving in the US military, and suddenly that was a directive that was given to General James Mattis, the head of the Defense Department at the Pentagon. It blindsided the Pentagon. General Mattis scrambled to understand what the president wanted, and indeed has been scrambling ever since to try and determine how to put that policy into practice. The president on Twitter has effectively ordered, certainly encouraged, his Attorney General Jeff Sessions to shut down Robert Mueller's probe of ties between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Attorney General Jeff Sessions not only hasn't done that, but just within the last couple of hours has pushed back against President Trump, saying that he will not be unduly influenced by political consideration. So what is Mike Pompeo going to do now? He doesn't have an ambassador he can call in South Africa. The State Department has been somewhat denuded of senior staff, and so the Africa specialists that previous secretaries of state could call upon are not there in the numbers that they were before. The State Department now, and Mike Pompeo specifically, has to decide what this means. Closely study the land issue in South Africa, and then do what with it? That is all very unclear. Let me just make one last point on the issue of the ambassador, Jane. In many ways, South Africa should perhaps be a little bit careful in terms of what it wishes for with regards to the appointment of an ambassador. The good people of Iceland discovered earlier this week that President Trump is planning to send a very wealthy dermatologist their way, someone who made substantial contributions to the Trump election campaign, but who does not appear to have a great deal of understanding of the situation in Iceland. He's going to be the next US ambassador to that country.
As you say, South Africa might be lucky there. Thank you for that, Simon Marks. While we